All right, we're live, and so as I was saying before I hit push record, there's introductory material already posted, but I'm going to recap just a little bit. But today, what I'd like to do is get through the first three speeches in praise of love, in praise of Eros, the Greek word Eros. So it's a erotic love, romantic love. But we're going to try to get through the first three speeches in praise of love from Plato's Symposium. And I went over sort of the structure of the dialogue last time. Remember, we're hearing all of this from the narrator Apollodorus, and he heard it from a guy who was actually there, Aristodemus. One could spend some time interpreting that, trying to get a deeper meaning behind the dialogue and why the narrative framing is couched in the way it is. But we talked a little bit about that last time. I'm not going to revisit that whole issue. But the speeches themselves, these are the first five speeches. You've got Phaedrus to begin with, and we already got started on Phaedrus. If you watch the lecture I posted at the very end of it, we started on Phaedrus, but I'll do it again. We'll look at it again briefly. And then there's Pausanias, Eryximachus, Aristophanes, and Agathon. After that is Socrates. He's the grand, the ultimate finale. His speech is supposed to be the culmination of all the previous speeches. But when it comes to your first assignment, Dylan was asking about the first essay. If you choose to write about the symposium, you need to write on one of the first five. So, Phaedrus, Pausanias, Eryximachus, Aristophanes, or Agathon. You need to pick one of those and not write about Socrates. So if you write your paper on Symposium, pick one of those. You're going to either defend it and maybe show how I agree with Eryximachus, for instance. I think he's on the right track when it comes to love, and defend it or critique it. No, this guy's wrong. He's completely, up in the clouds, in some fantasy world. Love is nothing like that, and maybe argue against it. So that's basically, if you decide to write on the Symposium, that's the kind of paper I'll be looking for. But again, just to repeat, today we're going to try to get through the first three. We already got a good start on Phaedrus in the last lecture. And the next class, so on Tuesday at 11 a.m., I'll record the next lecture for the Symposium, and we'll get through Aristophanes and Agathon, and we'll probably even get started a little bit on Socrates, although, like I said, that's not going to be a part of the first assignment. So thinking by the end of the week next week, or early in the following week, we will be finished with Plato, and we'll be moving on to Descartes. So if you haven't already, get a copy of this book or find a copy of the Meditations by Descartes online. Okay. So I feel like I just gave you a bunch of information that was important. So if anybody has any questions, don't be shy. Feel free to raise your hand, jump in, or type something in the chat box. But otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of continue where we left off in the previous lecture. So let's talk about Phaedrus. And so Phaedrus, he is a rhetorician. Spell that correctly, right? So he teaches rhetoric. He teaches people how to speak persuasively, right? And how does he start his speech in praise of love? Well, the first thing he says is that Eros, love, erotic love. In English we use the word love a little bit more broadly. For the ancient Greeks, they had all these different terms, right? Philia, eros, agape. Okay, things like brotherly love, a love of a friend, love of your neighbor. Things like this, love of your fellow countrymen. These are all different types of love, but eros is specifically what we might think of as romantic or erotic love, and so we have to keep this in mind. So for Phaedrus, Eros, he wants to say, is the most ancient god. So if you know your Greek mythology or Roman mythology, they'll call this deity Cupid. Your Valentine's Day is coming up pretty soon, so maybe this is kind of appropriate. I didn't mean to do it that way, but it kind of worked out, I guess. Um, but the first thing he says is that Eros, love, is the most ancient, and he provides some kind of flimsy proof for that. He just says, well, all these people wrote about love, these poets, philosophers, genealogists, and they all agree that love is one of the most ancient gods. And since love is one of the most ancient gods, it gives us one of the most greatest of all gifts. It provides us. I guess all the gods provide a gift to humanity. Zeus, what does he do? Well, Zeus, most of people, if you know about Zeus, he's associated as the thunder god and thunder and lightning, but he's also associated with hospitality. So being a good host, that's sort of the spirit of Zeus. Okay, what does Eros bring to humanity? What gift does it bring to us? I read this at the end of the last lecture, but I guess I can start. I'll start where we left off. This is at the bottom of page 9. He says, all sides agree then that love is one of the most ancient gods. As such, he gives to us the greatest goods. I cannot say what greater good there is for a young boy than a gentle lover, or for a lover than a boy to love. There's a certain guidance each person needs for his whole life if he is to live well. And nothing imparts this guidance, not high kinship, not public honor, not wealth. Nothing imparts this guidance as well as love. What guidance do I mean? I mean a sense of shame at acting shamefully, and a sense of pride in acting well. Without these, nothing fine or great can be accomplished in public or in private. So someone want to jump in here and give me a brief summary of what he just said there? What is he basically saying? What does love do? What makes love so great? What does it do to us that's so awesome? Why should we praise it? How would I sum up what he just said there? Love gives us guidance, but what kind of guidance? You can type it in if you want. Go ahead, Dylan. Yeah.
Maybe he believed that divine guidance, is that what he's referring to?
Well, you're right to say that, because that all of them, I guess until we get to Socrates, it gets a little bit more complicated, but all of them are speaking of the god, right? Eros. So they're thinking of it as a deity. So in a sense, you're right, it's divine guidance. But it makes us, I guess what they're thinking is that, look, anytime you feel love for somebody, like not just your, like you love your parents or you love your family or whatever, when you're in love, yeah, I don't know how else to put it. When you want to get busy with someone, right? I guess that is that god, Eros, is moving your soul, right? I mean, you've probably seen cartoons with the little Cupid shooting his arrow at people, and as soon as you get shot with Cupid's arrow, the next person you see, you just desire them. You like really want them, and you can't help it. And so, I guess they are all assuming that this is something that is somewhat spiritual. That this god, Eros, love, whatever you want to call it, is doing this to us. But why is that a good thing? Like he says that when we do this, when we feel love for other people, it inspires us and it makes us what? How does it change us? Why is it good? I guess it feels good for us, and maybe if the other person also likes us back, it might feel good for them. But in the greater scheme of things, is it just unequivocally good when we fall in love with somebody? He says it does. He says, and I'll read what I just read. He says, there's a certain, sorry, I cannot say what a greater good there is. So this is the good, he says, that love gives you. Then somebody be in love. There's a certain guidance each person needs his whole life if he's to live well. And nothing imparts this guidance, not high kinship, not public honor, not wealth. Nothing imparts this guidance as well as love. What guidance do I mean? I mean a sense of shame and acting shamefully, and a sense of pride in acting well. Without these, nothing fine or great can be accomplished in private or in public. Um, so what's he basically saying there? What does love make us do? What kind of guidance does it impart to us? He puts it. Well, he's praising it, so it's something good. Gives us a sense of shame and acting shamefully, sense of pride and acting well. Yeah, how would you put that? Yeah, go ahead, Dylan, again.
Yeah, I'm looking at the next paragraph down. It says, "What I say in this, if a man is in love, and he describes that it's called you doing a shameful act by like a young boy." Yeah, he kind of confusing. Like,
yeah. Well, one thing that might throw you off, and maybe I should have warned you guys about this. All these men here, they're pretty wealthy, except for Socrates, right? And it seems like in Athens, and there's a lot more about this if you're interested. I mean, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but if you're interested, there's apparently a book. You know, if you read the introduction in this edition, there's actually a book you can read where like historians go over this. But one thing that might be throwing you off is all this stuff about a boy falling in love with you. So there's this sort of there was a practice amongst the upper elites in Athens, the men there. They seem to, by and large, be homosexual, right? And so try to not let that sort of, they seem to think of, and when we get to the next speech, when we get to, what is it, Pulsanius, it gets even more in your face. They seem to be very sexist, like they think that men are superior, and because of that, they think that love between men is like the highest form, right? So it's a sort of homosexuality that is quite historically unique. I suppose you could put it that way. It was, like I said, upper class Greeks, intellectuals, these types. They thought of it as sort of, but what is he saying? Forget about the gender, right? He says that if a boy loves somebody, he'll feel ashamed of doing shameful things. He'll feel pride for doing prideful things. Forget about that. Whether it's a boy or a girl or whatever, like the first crush that you ever had in your life, when you felt, attraction for somebody else. He's making the case that when you do that, it inspires you to act a certain way, and it's good, right? I mean, like, basically, it makes you you want to be a good person, I suppose, that's the sort of answer I was looking for. Well, let me see. I have in my my other class, and if you watch the previous lecture at the very end, you'll see where we just start talking about this. I think what we said is it provides moral guidance. As he puts it, it gives you a sense of shame for doing things that are shameful, a sense of pride at doing things that are good, because you want to, I suppose, you want to be as good a person as you can. That way you can impress the person you're in love with, I suppose, is the argument here, right? So when you fall in love, you try to be as moral and as good and as just and as righteous as possible in order to attract your lover, the person that you want to be your lover, I suppose, at that point. And he says that this is the most intense motivation for that kind of behavior. He says that, nothing, this is back to the line I was reading, nothing imparts this guidance, not high kinship. So even if you have a family who has a good reputation, you're born to a good family, if you're worried about public honor, if you're worried about wealth, all of those things might motivate you to be a good person and do the right thing and follow the laws and not hurt anybody. If you want to be rich, you don't want people hating you because no one will, like, I guess, give you money or, like, patronize you. Public honor, same thing. But he says that love, when I feel this eros, this attraction physical or whatever. I want to be with that person. That guides me more than anything, right? That's an even stronger motivation to be good and do good than high kinship, public honor, or even wealth. Um, what do you think? Anybody have any thoughts on that? Do you think that Phaedrus, the rhetorician, the guy who teaches us how to speak fancy and give a good speech, do you think he's right about that? Does love do this? Does love inspire people? Whenever people fall in love, they always become the best person they can be?
I mean, from a perspective.
So like just from like, what do you mean by that? Like, like, are you just saying sometimes yes, sometimes no? Or you mean like from the way they looking at it, they might think it's better, but maybe they're not, or
Oh, I
like,
mean, kind of both what you're saying, but I mean, main so for me, just like love can be drawn from many perspectives of life. I mean, love can make you do evil things. Love can make you do, good things. Just depending on your morality and most importantly, where you choose to put your faith or what you choose to do.
right,
So I mean, love. I mean, for example, because I love my quote unquote, because I love my mom, I can go
right.
kill somebody that cut her off early in the street. Because I love my mom, I can go give her a hug or give her a kiss. Kind of just those similarities.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I wasn't thinking about it that way. Like, okay, because that's so you might do something like because you love your mom so much that's completely irrational, but you might do something that's really good, like because of your love for your mom. So it all depends. Like, and so it really depends on what you do with that love. I guess maybe I'm trying to think to his example. He's saying, look, if you're in love with somebody, you want them to think of you in high regard. You want them to feel that you're worthy of being loved as well. You want them to love you back, I guess. So to me, though, and what you just said made me think about this. You could fake it, like maybe like I haven't seen that movie in forever, but maybe somebody else has seen it more recently than me and can remind me. Has anyone seen that movie? There's Something About Mary. Um, it's a pretty funny movie. It came out like in the
With
90s.
Steve Carell.
Does it have Steve Carell? I thought it had what's his
Or
name?
not
Like
Steve Carell.
the guy that's in Zoolander, the Zoolander guy, the guy that did Tropical Thunder and what's his
Madagascar.
name? It's gonna bug me, man, because I know the guy you're trying to say, and I can't remember his freaking name. It's one of his first
Adam
movies.
Sandler.
Dude, I was
Nah,
gonna say Adam Sandler, but that's not it, man. Somebody look it up, man. Somebody look up.
Ben Stiller.
Ben, thank you. Yes, thank you. Ben Stiller. Well, in this movie, I think he's like this really nice guy, right? And he's like, he finds like he meets his high school sweetheart years later, and like he tries to be a good guy to like win her heart, and I guess like he does by the end of the movie. But there's this other dude who's like Matt Dillon, I think, is the actor who plays him, and he basically like he's a private detective, and he fakes all this stuff. Like he listens in on her conversations to find out what she likes, and he like gives her dog a doggy treat so her dog will like him, and so he does like all these really slimy, like real sleazy things, and she doesn't know it. She thinks that he's just a real good guy, and like, how did you know that? Like, I love that too, and like we're just so much alike, and so he puts on a good show, but he's not really good. And so I think like Phaedrus is maybe not thinking of that, and I didn't even think about it till what you just said. I was usually thinking about sort of the other aspect. You were talking about how you know, it depends on the person. I have love for my mom, and because I love my mom, I might do something real sweet for her and buy her something on Mom's Day, or give her a hug. But I might get real angry because someone said something mean about her and beat the hell out of them. And maybe I should just sort of say, "Hey, that's disrespectful," and just move on. But I'm gonna beat the hell out of her. It's my mom. And so love can drive you to good things, and love can drive you to bad things. But I always think about it too, and anybody else want to jump in with any other examples. But you're talking about yourself. What about like the person you love? You know, what if you fall in love with somebody who's not such a good person? You might try to impress them by doing bad things. Yeah, Dylan, you were gonna jump in.
Oh yeah, my bad. I forgot. My
You forgot
bad.
what you're gonna say. But
Yeah.
yeah, like basically, I was just saying, like, I like the, what you were saying. I don't know if this was Dylan. Somebody was talking earlier about, their love for their mom and how it inspires them to sometimes do good and sometimes do bad. But again, what if you love somebody who's an evil doer? What if you're like, I still haven't seen that Suicide Squad movie, but like the Joker and the Harley Quinn, relation where he like basically, doesn't he like get her to turn into some evil criminal or something like that? So you can fall in love, and sure, like love can inspire you to do some really good stuff, but it can also do the other. It can also, it can go the other way. So I got a couple comments in here. Yeah, it looks like they're kind of agreeing. They're just, yeah, not all the time, sometimes, not always. Well, let's see what Pausanias has to say, and let's just, I forgot to do this at the beginning, so let's do this real quick right now. Um, each one of these speakers, remember I went over this in more detail in the last video, the last lecture, but each of these speakers is different, right? Phaedrus teaches rhetoric. He teaches people how to speak. He's kind of like almost like your speech professor if you ever take intro to speech. Um, no one really knows for sure who Pausanias is. All we know is that he's Agathon's boyfriend, and he's much younger than Agathon. And I think that he's maybe just like, Agathon's this very successful, very popular poet. He writes tragedies. And so Pausanias, I think, is kind of just like one of his groupies sort of thing. But when you read his speech, I think he's trying to, this is my opinion, this is sort of my hot take, but I think his speech, he's trying to dispel that myth that he's just some young groupie, know that their love is real and there's something deeper to his love or whatever, right? Eryximachus, who we'll probably end with today, I don't think we'll get much further than him, but Eryximachus is a physician. I would say his speech is one of the most obscure. It's full of metaphor, and I think it broadens the notion of love much further than what we think of when we think of erotic attraction to somebody, right? Actually being, wanted to, being in love with somebody. Not like I said, we use the word love in English much more broadly, but in Greek they have these different terms. With Eros, there's always going to be involved physical attraction. You have a desire for this person, not just sort of like kinship. Yeah, Dylan, you had your hand raised.
Yes, sir. For my opinion, it seems as if like the love, the quote unquote, the love that they was expelling seemed more so like lust.
Yeah.
That turned into what they decided to call love.
Right. No, I think you're right. And it changes up a bit. It changes up a bit when we get to Socrates, okay? But I think that honestly, that's a good way to look at it, really. When the Greeks talked about Eros, it was always in that context. Like when you felt Eros for somebody, you wanted to have sex with them. Like there's no way around it. Or at least you wanted to be as physically near them and embrace them. It's not that you would act on that, but you felt it, And when you get to Socrates and to a lesser extent, I think Agathon, I think it becomes a little bit more spiritual. And it's not that element of desire is lacking. It's not that what you call lust is lacking, but for Socrates, it's there for some higher purpose, right? And I don't want to jump too far ahead, but no, you're completely. I would say it's appropriate for you to think of it like this sounds like lust, not love, But again, the Greeks had like 4 or 5 different words for what we call love. We talk about the word love. We use that in so many different contexts. I love pizza. I love my mom. I love music. It's like, and each time we use it, it kind of means something different. There's similarities, I guess. But yeah, you're right, Dylan. I think lust is kind of where we're at right now, especially when we're talking about the first few speeches, and arguably all of them until you get to the end, until you get to Socrates, and he starts saying, well, yes, there's this desire, but what is it really desire for? Why do we want sex? Why do we lust? And he has this, I guess, a broader view of things, and why, how does that desire fit into a higher purpose? But again, that's a bit ahead. So let's sort of, I guess, we'll wait till we talk about that. We'll broaden the conversation probably next meeting towards the end. But yeah, B. Tracy says love can change you. Yeah, that definitely. I think that's where I would agree with Phaedrus, that love does, it changes you when you fall in love with somebody for the first time. It makes you, it's a part of growing up, I guess. It adds something to your character, to your identity. But where I disagree, or where I think he's a bit weak, is that he always assumes that that's going to be a good thing, that it's always going to end up, turning you into a good character and not a bad one. But I think, love can go either way. Depends on you, depends on the person you fall in love with, etc. All right, well, let's go ahead. Let's move on to the next speech here. And the next one, like I said, this is Pausanias. And he's the, I don't know. We don't know what his occupation is, but he's definitely Agathon's lover, right? That they're involved somehow. And Agathon, he's the one hosting the party. He's the one that's having this feast. And he's much older than Pausanias and much more wealthy. Okay, so what's Pausanias say about love? This is on page 13. He begins. He says, I'm not quite sure our subject has been well defined. Our charge has been simple, to speak in praise of love. This would have been fine if love himself were simple too. But as a matter of fact, there are two kinds of love. In view of this, it might be better to begin by making clear which kind of love we are to praise. Let me therefore try to put our discussion back on the right track and explain which kind of love ought to be praised. Then I shall give him the praise he deserves as the God that he is. So now he's going to say we got to be a little bit more specific about what we mean by love. And maybe in a way, you're going to see here in a second, Dylan, this might be addressing you, that maybe it's not just lust, right? Maybe that's a lower form of love, but let's see what else he goes on to say. He says, it's a well-known fact that love and Aphrodite are inseparable. If therefore Aphrodite were a single goddess, there could also be a single love. But since there are actually two goddesses of that name, there are also two kinds of love. I don't expect you'll disagree with me about the two goddesses, will you? One is the older deity, the motherless daughter of Uranus, the god of heaven. She is known as Urania, or heavenly Aphrodite. The other goddess is younger, the daughter of Zeus and Dion. Her name is Pandemos, or common Aphrodite. It follows, therefore, that there is a common as well as a heavenly love, depending on which goddess is love's partner. And although, of course, all the gods must be praised, we must still make an effort to keep these two gods apart. Okay, so he's bringing up all these Greek names, so that might be confusing to some readers. If you're not familiar with the Greek pantheon of gods, all these like Aphrodite this and Dion that, it might be kind of confusing. But let's get some, to me, the most important thing to get out of this is the Aphrodite point. So for him, Eros, this is the god that we're talking about here, Cupid, the god of love, whatever, is always associated with Aphrodite. Now, you might actually be familiar with Aphrodite, even though you don't even know it. You might have seen a sculpture or a painting of, a woman in a shell, like a seashell, and she's rising out of the ocean nude. This beautiful woman. That's Aphrodite. That's actually the common Aphrodite. That's the one that most people are familiar with. fact, I'd never heard of the heavenly Aphrodite ever until I'd read Plato's Symposium. I was like, I didn't know there was another Aphrodite. So there's the common and heavenly Aphrodite. And there's a bit of sexism in here, as I said, they seem to value homosexuality between men because they're sexist. They think women are somehow inferior, not as intelligent. So if you love a man, it's even better than loving a woman. And again, there's more sexism here because the common Aphrodite, her parents are, mixed. There's a man and a woman, okay? But the heavenly Aphrodite is born solely of a man, right? Just spontaneously from Uranus, right? The primal god. And so the heavenly is better. It doesn't have any female genes mixed with it, right? So you got to kind of try to overlook the sexism and the sort of, I guess, elevation of, I personally got no problems with homosexuality or bisexuality or any kind of sexuality. Hey, you do what you do, man. Whatever makes you feel good. But they seem to there's this hierarchy, whereas these upper class Greeks thought that the admiration, the love between men was the best, right? Try not to let that. To me, that's distracting. I think there's a better philosophical point if you just kind of look through some of those historical anomalies. They're interesting, they're fun to talk about, but I think that there's a more universal point to what's going on here. So when he's talking about heavenly and common love, he does seem to utilize this hierarchy and putting the love between men on top. But if you just get rid of that element and sort of get at what he's really saying, I think that you can interpret his speech in a way that is more neutral and more universal, regardless of your sexual orientation or your gender or whatever, right? But I'm going to go ahead and read the rest, or not all of it, but I'll read some more of his speech. But some of you might have already done this, and I'm hoping you did some of the reading. But even if you didn't do the reading, you might even just guess what you think he's going to say about heavenly love versus common love. What do you think the difference would be? Like, what would common love be versus heavenly? Someone's already kind of used the right word for one of them, for the common love, to give you a hint.
One is lust.
Yeah, so which one do you think is the lust? The common or the heavenly? Pretty
I would
easy.
assume the heavenly.
No. That's the common. That's the lower. Like, lust is lower. That the heavenly is more like you care about their soul. You care about their well-being. Like, that's the higher, more heavenly, more honorable. But the more common one is just lust, like you say.
Professor, yeah. This is Lola Jones from your first class.
Sure.
Would you say that he was saying that this was like a pure form of love?
Right. I think so. I think if he was asked that question, is it more pure? Yes, I think it has more pure intentions, I suppose, right? That, like, if you love somebody with the heavenly love, you really care about them as a person and you want them to do well. Whereas if you have the common love, all you really care about is getting busy.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah.
That's one way to think about it. He says something interesting at the bottom of 13, which I think is questionable, right? He says that we have to praise all kinds of love, but the heavenly is better than the common. He says the reason for this applies in the same way to every type of action. Considered in itself, no action is either good or bad, honorable or shameful. Take, for example, our own case. We had a choice between drinking, singing, or having a conversation. Now, in itself, none of these is better than any other. How it comes out depends entirely on how it is performed. If it is done honorably and properly, it turns out to be honorable. If it is done improperly, it is disgraceful. And my point is that exactly this principle applies to being a lover. Love is not in himself noble and worthy of praise. It depends on whether the sentiments he produces in us are themselves noble. Um, I like this because I think it's a bit of a response to the first speech. Because remember, one of the problems that I think you guys were, before I even said anything, you guys were quick to point out that Phaedrus, love doesn't always make you good. Love doesn't always make you a good person. Sometimes it makes you a bad person. Sometimes love turns you into the wicked ways and not the good ways or whatever. But now Pausanias is saying, no, not always, right? It has to be done properly. So there's a proper way of doing love and there's an improper way of doing love. One thing I'm not quite sure I want to follow him with, though, is he seems to say that this applies to everything. He says that this is the same with every type of action. Considered in itself, it's neither good nor bad. And then he mentions drinking, singing, having a conversation. He's like, none of those are good or bad. It depends on how they're done. If they're done with honor, they're good. If they're done with disgrace, they're disgraceful. That doesn't seem right, though. Yeah, Tracy, you got your hand raised. You're gonna
Yeah,
object to that?
because
Yeah.
I kind of understand where he's like how he used Aphrodite, because I know a little about Aphrodite, and she wasn't always like good. She did like bad stuff. So for him to say that makes a lot of
Right.
sense. For
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, she was sneaky, right? I mean, she was. If you look at the Greek gods, and to me, this is the best way to interpret them, really. I think the way they used to teach it to us when I was a kid, I don't teach it anymore, I don't think, in grade school, but I remember when I was in kindergarten or first grade, I think we went over the Greek gods, and they taught it like they actually like thought of them. Some people actually probably believed that there was a dude up in the clouds with lightning bolts, but I
I
think
used to.
most people, so there's people that still believe in this stuff, but it's very rare, but there's still people that believe in these gods. But I think it was more like it was a force of nature, and they used that as a personification. And Aphrodite, I think, is supposed to personify that. I don't know if you're any literature majors in here, literary film studies, you might know the term of femme fatale, right? Aphrodite's kind of the femme fatale. She makes you can't help but want her. You can't help but want her. But sometimes she leads you to good, and sometimes she leads you to bad. But this common Aphrodite, right? That's the one that you're referring to. That's the one that I have in mind. The heavenly Aphrodite is this really obscure. Like, I've never heard of it outside of this. Maybe I need to go review my Hesiod or whatever. The idea is, though, that like whenever you feel that for someone, whenever you feel that desire for someone, it can inspire you to good or bad. But he seems to think the heavenly is always good. Like the heavenly is different. If Eros is attached to the common Aphrodite, it's not so great. But back to the passage I was just reading, though, like when he says that nothing in itself is good or bad, it depends on how it's done. Like I think that's, to me, that sounds like the examples that he gives aren't so bad, but when you try to think about it, it seems like there's problems with that. He just mentions drinking, singing, or having a conversation. I got two hands up. Tracy, what did you have something?
Oh no,
Or
no.
Keisha, you want to say something, Keisha?
Yeah, it's not applicable to everything. I feel like you can't kill somebody gracefully and like
Right.
it'll be okay. Like no, you still killed somebody.
Right. Good example. Like, in fact, that's probably the one I would have come up with. Like, yeah, drinking, singing, having murder. Yeah. Do it with honor, like, I think, yeah, this is not as universal as he says it is. No action in itself is good or bad. It depends on how it's done. It's like, yeah, I don't know if that's quite the case. Um, this kind of reminds me though, and maybe this is where he's getting this notion from. This reminds me a little bit of Aristotle and the principle of the golden mean. Now Aristotle is a bit later than Plato. Aristotle studied at Plato's school, and this principle of the golden mean, even though it's associated with Aristotle, and he wrote extensively about it. It's widely believed and understood by historians that it was kind of a cultural thing. The Greeks prized moderation. I think that, and especially when you read things like this and some of the things they say about sexuality, I think modern readers tend to think of the ancient Greeks and the Romans during certain periods as very hedonistic. They're very wow. They're like all about sex, and like they're not very conservative, and like they're all over the top and having orgies and all this stuff, right? I think that's a mischaracterization. They were not puritanical. The Greek culture did not shun sex or drinking or these things. But Greek culture in general, ancient Greek culture, what it promoted was moderation. And so you didn't want to actually be a complete teetotaler. Like if you never drank at all and you never had any fun and never had any sex, then you were considered kind of a bore and kind of a fool. But if you did it too much, then yeah, like that was bad too. So you have to find this sort of golden mean, sort of the middle. And I think that this might be influencing Pausanias here, right? That, nothing is bad or good in itself. It depends on how it's done. But I think, yeah, Keisha, you're right. Like, how do you murder somebody like gracefully or whatever? I think this principle doesn't quite apply in that case, perhaps. But let's read some more here. How does he distinguish between the common love versus the heavenly love? This is on page 14. He says this is the first full paragraph. The common Aphrodite's love is himself truly common. As such, he strikes wherever he gets a chance. This, of course, is the love felt by the vulgar, who are attached to women no less than to boys, to the body more than to the soul, and to the least intelligent partners, since all they care about is completing the sexual act, right? So it's lust. And again, more sexism thrown in there. Yeah, they like women just as much as boys. Oh, sorry, ladies. They were a chauvinist, male chauvinists before that was even a term. Whether they do it honorably or not is of no concern. That's why they do whatever comes their way, sometimes good, sometimes bad. And which one it is incidental to their purpose. For the love who moves them belongs to a much younger goddess, who through her parentage partakes of the nature of both female and male, right? More sexism thrown in there. But again, yeah, I think the word lust kind of gets at it, but also a very low standard for what they are attracted to, right? They don't care how intelligent the person is. They don't care if they're good or bad. They just want to get it done quick and get out of there, right? Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, or mister, or whatever, right? That old thing. So I think, yeah, the word lust kind of hits it on the head, right? But what about the heavenly love? Let's see what he has to say about that, right? He says, contrast this with the heavenly Aphrodite, this goddess whose descent is purely male. Hence, this is love for boys, right? Again, men are smart, men are intellectual, so love for them is more mature, more sexism there. And homosexuality as well. Chauvinistic homosexuality. It's considerably older and free from the lewdness of youth. That's why those who are inspired by her love are attracted to the male. They find pleasure in what is by nature stronger and more intelligent. Right? Again, try to control your anger against these guys. even within this group that's attracted to handsome boys, some are not moved purely by heavenly love. And this is where I think he's starting to try to defend himself, because he's younger. He's a younger guy, and he's dating an older Agathon. And he says sometimes, you know, those who fall in love with little boys, they prefer older ones, though, whose cheeks are showing the first traces of a beard. That's a sign they've begun to form minds of their own. I'm convinced that a man who falls in love with a young man of that age is generally prepared to share everything with the one he loves. He's eager, in fact, to spend the rest of his own life with him. He certainly does not aim to deceive him, to take advantage of him while he's still young and inexperienced, and then after exposing him to ridicule, to move quickly on to someone else, right? So it's not, I'm just going to have a one-night stand, I'm just going to get busy with this guy and leave him, or this woman. No, I want to be with them forever. I want to make sure they have a good life. I want to be a companion with them. How does he put it? They find pleasure in what is by nature stronger and more intelligent. They're attracted more to the soul than the body, right? I don't know what words you would use to describe that. Lust is a kind of good word that kind of gets at the common love, but heavenly love, I don't know. A sort of, I want to pair bond with this person, right? I want to tie my fate to them, and I want to grow and mature with them. And I care about not just their body. I'm not just lusting after their body, but I'm really concerned with their well-being as a person, right? Now, before we move on, there's one thing that I want to read. It's on page 16. He says something that I think that at least in our pop culture, when you watch movies, when you watch TV, and you see these popular reenactments or representations of love, I think that this point he makes on page 16 is kind of true. But I think in real life, I'm not quite sure. I think I kind of want to call bullshit on this. But let's read this, and you'll see what I'm talking about, hopefully, and maybe even get some discussion out of this passage. It's on page 16. He basically talks about how he says that certain things that we would normally consider shameful, and certain things that we would consider not good to do, we would actually encourage or praise in someone who's in love. If a lover did it for their lover, we would praise it. Okay, so what's he talking about? Let's read the quote. Again, this is page 16. If you have a different version, I keep forgetting, some of y'all have different versions. It's line 182E. So if you have in the margins, the numbers, 182E. A couple lines above that, he says, recall that a lover is encouraged in every possible way. This means that what he does is not considered shameful. On the contrary, conquest is deemed noble and failure shameful. And as for attempts at conquest, our custom is to praise lovers for totally extraordinary acts. So extraordinary, in fact, that if they performed them for any other purpose whatever, they would reap the most profound contempt. Suppose, for example, that in order to secure money or a public post or any other practical benefit from another person, a man were willing to do what lovers do for the ones they love. Imagine that in pressing his suit, he went to his knees in public view and begged in the most humiliating way, that he swore all sorts of vows, that he spent the night at the other man's doorstep, that he were anxious to provide services that even a slave would have refused, Well, you can be sure that everyone, his enemies no less than his friends, would stand in his way. His enemies would jeer at his fawning servility, while his friends, ashamed on his behalf, would try to everything to bring him back to his senses. But let a lover act in any of these ways, and everyone will immediately say, what a charming man he is. No blame attaches to his behavior. Custom treats it as noble through and through. And what is even more remarkable is that, at least according to popular wisdom, the gods will forgive a lover even for breaking his vows. A lover's vow, our people say, is no vow at all. And what I think he means by that is, it's not that he's going to break his commitment to his lover, but he'll break other commitments for his lover. The freedom given to the lover by both gods and men, according to our custom, is immense. So what's he saying there, right? You know, there like certain behaviors that you would not approve of in anyone else, you would actually think are signs of a good thing, or wow, what a sweet, charming person he is. For instance, he says, you know, if a man got on his knees in public and begged in the most humiliating way, you know, if you saw somebody on the streets on his knees begging his boss, please give me a raise, please, I'll do anything for you, please, 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 I'll do anything, I'll clean your shoes, I'll wash your car, I'll take your dog for a walk every day, please just give me a 25-cent raise, please, 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 please. We'd be like, dude, you're pathetic, man. Like, have some dignity. If he doesn't treat you well, get another job or whatever, right? Like, that's just beneath you. But apparently, if you're doing this, I love you, sweetie, please marry me. I love you so much. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Please, I can't live without you. We see that, we're like, oh, how romantic. How sweet. Is that true? Do we really do that? That's what he says we do.
I mean, kind of true.
I don't think it is. Well, I think it kind of is and it kind of isn't. Like, it's still, there's another thing, it depends on the situation, you know? Like, it always works in the movies. It always works in the movies, but I saw this, there's a scene from, Lola said it right. Love has no shame, you know? Like, yeah, it's like people do, but I mean, I think about some of the dumbass stuff I did back when I was early 20s and in love and stupid stuff. Like, I'm like, man, it's just, why'd I do that? And it didn't work, by the way. It usually scares them off. They're like, you're creepy, you're clingy. Yeah, it works in the movies, but in real life, it's kind of like, what? I saw this clip from what's the name of the movie, man? You gotta help me. It's got Will Smith, and he plays this dude who's like a player. Hitch, yeah, that's it, Hitch. I've never seen it, but there was this clip. This dude was like making fun of it on YouTube, and I mean, I forgot who said it. Was one of these YouTube guys, and it was funny because like he made a good point. Like there was a scene in this movie where Hitch goes into this bar, and he meets this woman. She's a real attractive woman. She's sitting there, and she just like kind of wants to be alone. I think she's just got off work and she's like working on her work, just having drinks, and she kind of wants to be left alone. And this dude's hitting on her, and Hitch sees her being annoyed by this guy, and he comes to save the day, all smooth, but she's still kind of like giving him a bunch of like, putting up this wall. But he's real smooth, but he doesn't hit on her like completely. He doesn't get her phone number. He doesn't ask her out. He just finds out what she does for a living. And then it cuts to the next scene, and she's at her job. She's like working as a newspaper columnist, and she gets a package from FedEx, and she opens the box, and it's like a little toy walkie-talkie, like a Fisher-Price kids walkie-talkie, and she like clicks the button, and it's Hitch. He's like, "Hey, sweetheart, how's your column going today?" She's like, "Who is this?" He's like, "It's the Mr. Guy at the bar. Just wondering how you doing." And all her friends at the office are real excited. They're like, how exciting, because he's like, well, just wonder what you're doing on Sunday, honey. You want to go out for a date on Saturday? She's like, I'm busy Saturdays. What about Sunday? And they're like, say yes, you know. And I forget what happens, but I think she like makes a date with him or whatever, you know. And it's kind of believable in the movie, right? But ladies, come on, man.
No, that's weird. That's weird.
Yes.
That's so weird.
Thank you. In real life, you'd be calling the security guard. The women at the desk across from you be like, "What's that? That's creepy." You know, they'd be freaking out too. They wouldn't be like, you know, yeah. But it's Will Smith, and he's, you know, all handsome looking and you know, whatever. So you know, it's kind of believable in the movie, but in real life, that would not work. Like that'd be like totally, you know, creep. There's a movie from the 80s called Say Anything, where the guy, like, the chick dumps him, and he goes to her house in the middle of the night, and he plays this boom box. He's got this huge radio over his head, and he's like holding this radio. She wakes up, you know, she's like, here's all this music outside, and she goes out on her balcony, and he's just sitting there with his radio, and he's playing this song that they used to play while they were having sex, you know. And she's like, and most women that I know, like when I was growing up, they would watch that movie, and whenever that scene came on, they would all swoon like, oh. I'm like, you would not do that in real life. If a dude came to your house at 2 a.m. and was like blasting something after you dumped him, like, you'd be calling the cops, man, restraining order. Like, I'm sorry, like, maybe not always, but like, I don't know. I think. What's that?
It's corny.
Yeah.
Like, I ain't like man, that type of dude where if a girl was to break with me and I was tired of her back, I would not go to her house like a stalker.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, if it was meant to be over, then it's just over. It's not. She's not.
Right. I mean, I think these movies, they're almost like they're cute and everything, but I'm kind of with you. I think they send out the wrong message, you know? It's almost like creating the stalkers of the future. Like these dudes, they think it's like romantic. Like, I'm with you. Like, you need to just move on, bro. Like, move on. Like, if she wants you back, maybe she'll come looking, but don't be going to her house at 2 or 3 in the morning. You know, you might see a couple silhouettes up there, you know, in the window instead of the one. You know, but yeah, I'm with you, man. I think that I think it can work. Like, if a woman is already attracted to you and you do these grand gestures, then yeah, but it's not gonna, like win her heart. Yeah, Keisha, what are you gonna say?
Yeah, I wanted to say it mostly has a lot to do with attraction, because these people in these movies are very attractive people.
Right.
Or like this is like what people want to look like. Not everybody per se, but like, come on, like it's a lot of people that want to be like Will Smith or like be like the funny guys or famous guys in movies.
Right.
So I feel like if you were like that in real life and like you knew you were popular, I feel like that type of stuff could work. Because like if Will Smith, not Will Smith right now, but like if I was like around his age and he was like popping in, I don't know, that might work on me too. Like,
yeah, no, that's why I think that's what makes it more believable, because you already kind of like him, and so you don't think about these things while you're watching the movie. You kind of suspend your disbelief, and like you said, it might actually work for him because he's Will Smith, and like, you know, he could maybe get off. He could probably get away with that kind of stuff in real life. There was some I forgot her name, but she was a female comedian, and she said something pretty funny. She says, I hate sexual harassment. Oh, wait, I misspoke. I meant to say, I hate sexual harassment from men who I'm not attracted to. Something like that. And it's like, but I think, to be technical though, like I always have to take, like, I think once a year they make you take this sexual harassment training, but like the legal definition is unwanted sexual advances or whatever. So I guess if you want them, it's not technically harassment, but it was still kind of a funny joke. But I think it's like, yeah, I think if you're already, like you said, you're popular, you're well liked, you're, you know, whatever, you've already, like, those things might work, but you know, I don't know, like the way he puts it, you know, I don't think they always work. I saw some video. I probably watched too many of these stupid viral videos on YouTube, but they're funny, man. This one maybe is not so funny. I shouldn't have laughed, but somebody told me it was staged. So now I don't feel so bad about laughing, but I'm sure some of you maybe have seen this video or seen something like it. This guy's he's at the mall, at the shopping mall, and he gets on his knees to propose to this woman to ask her to marry him, and everyone just stops, you know, like they're all walking by with their shopping bags, and they're all like, what, he's gonna ask her to get married, and like, so they're all like cheering and egging her on, say yes, say yes, say yes, and she's like, I'm sorry, man, no, and she like walks off, and he's like, oh my God, what? You know, he's like freaked out. He thought, you know, I'm gonna do this grand gesture in public, and you know, it's gonna be so like this movie moment, and it totally like she's like, what? No, forget it. You know, I don't know what kind of fool would be asking their woman out in a shopping mall. I mean, to me, that doesn't seem like the most romantic place to propose to somebody, but maybe that's just me. I don't know. Maybe they met there or something like that. I don't get it, but we're almost out of time, so I hesitate to move on to the next speech from Symmachus. So I'm going to wait till next lecture. So for next lecture, we're going to do Symmachus. We'll do, who's after that? Aristophanes, and then Agathon. We probably won't have time to get to Socrates, but if we do, we do. That'd be great. But I don't want to rush through it. I hope to get some more discussion out of the class. But that'll be Tuesday at 11 a.m. If you can make it, great. If you can't, you know, I'll post the recording right after it's done. But the paper should be due at the end of the week next week, unless we just end up taking a lot longer on this than I planned. But I'm going to stop recording right now, so that'll be the end of the